to make sure that those rhino orphans actually survive. And for the establishment of this project, we have very much Karen Klenner to thank, with all her many years of experience as a
law enforcement officer.
Obviously, I've got my brain this morning. As a rehabilitation specialist, she's been involved in rehabilitation for many, many years, and she's now become a consultant worldwide. And we're very thankful that we can depend on her experience and her knowledge, and to pass it on to everybody who's going to be attending our training courses. So thank you very much, Karen. And
sure, thank you.
Yes, to you.
Do you think we should give her a biscuit after that? Thanks, Renette. Welcome to everyone. When the next guys arrive, we can just get them to introduce themselves, but if we can just go around so that we all know who everybody is, so that if they say something funny, you know whether to look at them strangely or throw something at them or take it as Bible. We start on this side. Okay, we'll start on this side. Alice is eating biscuits. Renette.
I am now, so yeah, Katja can start.
I'm Dr. Kuppel. I'm the senior vet for the Johannesburg Zoo.
My name's Elaine. I also work at the zoo. I work with birds.
I'm Amy, and I work for the wildlife service.
Response strategy and how we're hoping to draw everybody in, and where the need comes and how this whole project has developed. We're looking at a national coordinated network that will facilitate conservation-based rescue and rehabilitation of rhino. How does your thing work here? Like so. Like so.
If you press up,
That one there. Thanks, Katja. What would we do without you? Not just a good vet. You're probably aware of a whole lot of the problems that are currently existing within the rhino crisis. There are a number of injured rhino. The rhino are being shot and are actually surviving the poachings. They've got fila here at the zoo. I think Tabamanzi have got a couple of shot rhino as well. But there are a number of rhino that are actually surviving the crisis, and in addition to that, a number of calves that are being orphaned. There are gunshot wounds. There is the new thing now of the facial deformities, where they're defacing rhino and then leaving them alive, where they actually take the horn right off at the base, and many of them are actually surviving that. And along with that comes a lack of specialized knowledge on those two aspects. Even the vets at this stage are saying, you know, we haven't had to deal with this on this scale, and they're having to catch up very, very quickly to develop those techniques. There's a lack of coordinated response, so someone has a poaching, the rhino is still alive, it has been defaced, or there's a calf, and there's an absolute, you know, who do we phone, what do we do? If they have a good vet on site who's linked in with the network, they can link in, but most of the time it's a case of, we've had a poaching, what do we do? So it might be days, in fact, before they get the right help. There's also a problem with all of the pay and play facilities, and the number of these are increasing dramatically. People are taking rhino calves, rhino orphans, and then it's a huge fundraising and media issue. So you get the calf, and then you can bring in lots of paying tourists, and many of those calves don't survive under those conditions. The rhino crisis has also resulted in a huge number of rhinopreneurs. All of the information that's on the slides, the PowerPoints, are all on your CDs, so you don't have to write frantically. The Rhino manual is on your CDs, and there's a huge amount of resource material that I've put onto the CDs for you. So rather than write frantically as we go along, let's workshop and chat and go around it. The Rhinopreneurs, I think we're up to 251 Rhino organizations, new organizations that have started because of the Rhino crisis and are raising funds on the back of the poaching. The stress factor, there's no field response or support. Very often if you have a rhino that is defaced, if you have a calf that is injured, your vet may come out, he may treat the rhino on site, and he then goes back to work. He's unable to stay on site and actually nurse that calf or help you through the first couple of days as to what to do with that calf or with the injured rhino. So we don't have any field response or support. It's a huge waste of resources. You know, money is being poured into these rhino The public respond in a wonderful way, but the money just sort of dissipates and is not directed to where it should be going. We've got unnecessary deaths and a dispersion of effort. These are exactly the type of situations that we're trying to avoid with rhino calves. Very cute, very sweet, the public love it, but it's not good for the rhino calf that's been through the trauma of a poaching. Hi, how are you? Got Vincent and guys from ProTrack, Hoedspruit. Great to have you with us. We started on this part because this part you heard at the Rhino Revolution meeting. So what's needed in order to address this problem? A coordinated approach. We're looking at something that's temporary, just for the period of the rhino crisis, so that if poaching stops tomorrow, it dissolves and falls apart. We don't have a huge organization, we don't have large numbers of staff and infrastructure that then have to be funded and salaried for the next 20 years. So we're looking at something just for the period of the crisis. And then we need to develop the skills, the response, and all the expertise needed around that. So what we're looking at doing through the rhino response strategy is to maximize the survival of the injured and orphaned rhinos, with the primary aim being back into the wild. We don't want hundreds of very tame, very difficult rhino that smash up vehicles that can't go back into the wild. You really want them to go back in order to contribute to conservation. Well, how did the rhino response strategy start? I thought I'd fortunately got out of rhino. I was involved for 25 years. I've done probably over 400 between the calves and the adults. Was just beginning to enjoy a normal life, going to movies again, having a life, and the rhino poaching crisis started. Lots and lots of calls. Can you help us with a calf? Can you send information? Please, can you quickly come and help? And it's not an effective or efficient way of doing it. So we put together a rhino manual, and even that doesn't seem to have been the answer. And at the same time, EWT was sitting in their offices, first at Joburg Zoo and then at Modderfontein, and they were beginning to see as well all of the problems with this and realizing that something had to be done. So it made a lot of sense that we came together and addressed the problem through the rhino response strategy. Basically, just the structure of it is that we have a partnership with the Endangered Wildlife Trust on the rhino orphan response side. We can't decide, you know what, ProTrack have actually got a team in Hoedspruit today, so please could they organize the next poaching in Hoedspruit? And we've got a rhino orphanage down in Cape Town, so actually could they have the next calf down there? So we actually have limited control over what happens. And with crises, you need to make an immediate decision. So this has happened, you've got to get down on the ground, you've got to work. And then that makes it much more difficult to deal from a public point of view is that there's very, very high emotional impact. Then there's a calf, an orphaned calf, and the mother's been shot, where there's a rhino whose face has been taken off, where there's 4 rhino that have been shot. There's huge emotional impact to the people involved and to the public, to the media. So you're dealing with all of these high emotions as well. And it draws a huge amount of attention. And that attention needs to be managed very, very carefully. So, given those definitions of a crisis, do we think that our rhino poaching is a crisis? No doubt. It's unpredictable. None of us have any idea where this situation is going. How are we going to get it under control? We have no idea. It poses a massive threat to not just South African populations, not just African populations, but all of the Asian populations of rhino as well. They're having a very hard time, and we don't hear about what's going on in India with the one-horned rhino. They are having a massive problem with their rhino. It's dynamic, we've got limited control, we've gone through all that side of it. And then in terms of the other definition, it poses a significant threat. If we don't get this sorted out, we're going to lose rhino. And on the more localized level with the rhino response strategy, the rhinos that are being defaced and the calves that are being left behind, if they don't get handled properly, the threat is we're going to lose them. Some of the threats that this rhino poaching crisis will hit us with are not just the possible extinction of rhino, but they're huge financial losses to the country. We've got no private rhino owners here. We through Tabamanzi. You're fully aware of what the impact is of the financial implications of this on private rhino owners, on national parks, on the government. Huge amounts of resources are being channeled just to rhino at the cost of other things. There's a huge level of criminality in it, huge organized crime syndicates. The criminality is a growing aspect of it. It's threatening other wildlife. Renette will tell you that certainly the EWT are starting to focus on the fact that whilst the rhino poaching has been happily going on with all of the attention and all of the media, the illegal trade and the poaching in other species has been nicely climbing along. And that invariably when they take a rhino horn, there's other stuff. There's ivory with it. The same guys who have these very good systems for trafficking the product are trafficking other wildlife product as well. And in some cases, live stuff. Renette, you had some of the figures on things like insects, reptiles.
We think there's probably about 100 live wild animals per month leaving through our Tambo, Ushaka and Cape Town airports, Cape Town International airports. These could be things like sun gazers, a lot of our scorpions, a lot of our spiders, especially the green spiders, a lot of our little seed-eating birds. What the guys do is the guys are based in Gauteng. They go off to the Eastern Cape and various places where there are huge farms. They pay the guys to put up mist nets to trap these birds, and then they go down, they collect the consignment, and it gets smuggled out through the airports, and very often through the harbours as well. So, you know, while all the law enforcement guys are focused on the rhinos, everything else is being wiped out because nobody's looking at that and nobody's got time to look at that. And just on the cycads, for example, we've got 3 cycad species that have gone extinct in our lifetime. They're gone. There's none of them left in the wild. There are 3 of them that have less than 10 specimens left in the wild. And there's an excess of 10 that only have 50 specimens left in the wild. So we've got at least 16 to 17 cycads that are endemic to South Africa that will be extinct in our lifetime, which is quite a scary thought. But you know, it's not a breeding carcass, it's not a cute little rhino calf, so very little attention is given to those. And that's a prehistoric species, and if that goes extinct, it's gone. I mean, you might find some in people's gardens in Gauteng, which is, Gauteng's probably got more cycads than anywhere else in the entire world in people's gardens, but the point is that they know they're not part of the...
It's scary stuff. And then there's also the human aspect of it. So we are dealing with a crisis, and to date we haven't dealt, unfortunately, with it very well. When there's a crisis, you have 3 options. You can just do nothing, shrug your shoulders, walk away, fall apart in a heap. You can react, so you wait until there's actually a poaching, you wait until there's actually an orphan calf, and then get into a total tiz. And try. Or you can be proactive and plan ahead, so that although it's unpredictable, though we have very little control over what's happening, at least we have things in place as part of crisis management that give us a much better tool to handle the crisis that we're dealing with. The rhino poaching crisis as it currently is occurring, we're dealing with on both a reactive and a proactive basis. Although there were indications we were heading for another crisis, I think it hit us a lot harder and quicker than we thought it was going to. So there's been a lot of kind of reactive, and the crisis is escalated so rapidly that so much of the government's response, the law enforcement response, the anti-poaching response, has been reactive. But fortunately, at the same time, there are groups starting to come in with a proactive basis underneath that. So what's needed? We need a plan and we need to act. And what is that when you need a plan and you get to action? Crisis management. You might not have known it, but you've been in crisis management. Crisis management's a fascinating field. It's become a highly specialized field, and there are experts all over the world, and they write fancy books on it. And the different types of crisis management are suited to different situations. But basically, if we're looking at a crisis management system, we're looking at planning and action. And it has to be dynamic and it has to be rapidly adaptable. What do we need from a crisis management system? We need to be able to identify we've actually got a crisis. How big is it? What are going to be the consequences of this crisis we've got? If we don't stop the poaching, what's going to happen? If we don't get to those defaced rhino, what's going to happen to them? So what is the extent? How big is this poaching crisis? What are we actually going to do about it? What resources are there available? Who's good at doing this? Who's good on the anti-poaching? Where's the veterinary resources? Who's got facilities? So identifying all of our resources, pulling everybody together into a network or a team, having at least some kind of plan in place. And what you didn't know that is going to come out of these workshops is an operational plan. We've started putting one together with the Endangered Wildlife Trust. Every workshop we have, every response that's done, everybody that gets involved will then input into a national operating plan, the Rhino Response Strategy. And the good thing about that is that if poaching stops tomorrow, that entire operational plan and the structure can then be moved across to another species. So again, we don't have something that has a vested interest in rhino poaching continuing. So all of the effort. But your input and your workshopping, because you're going to talk later as well, it's not just me going to waffle on, will go into this operational plan. We need to limit the damage as much as we possibly can. We want a managed response. We want to stop talking and actually get some action done. There are so many different crisis management systems available around the world, but we've had to look for one that is suited to these particular circumstances, a crisis management system that we know actually works, that can take into account that there are huge numbers of people and organizations and different circumstances involved. With crisis management as well, it's not necessarily a diplomatic process. We don't have the time, unfortunately, to have, although in fact they've had 90,000 workshops and sat and debated. We actually don't have the time for that anymore. So in the crisis, you have to just get in and act and do what's right. And make those decisions under a huge amount of pressure. The system that we're going to be using for the Rhino Response Strategy, and I could spend 6 weeks training you on a whole variety of different systems, but we're going to be using the incident command systems for the Rhino Response Strategy. It's a system that works. It's been tried, it's been tested. It works with wildlife and environmental crises. It's used by the US Coast Guard, the Californian Coast Guard, and many of the major international response agencies use the ICS system. The Gulf spill, they used it. The Treasure spill used it. It's been used extensively. It's also been used in a number of the recent earthquakes, the large oil spills, and various hurricanes. It was a system that was used during the Treasure spill. I know it's probably faded from our minds, but at one stage the media was packed with oiled penguins. In 2000, we had the Treasure spill in Cape Town. 20,000 birds were oiled, and the system that was used in order to draw all the teams together and get them functioning was the incident command system. It was used for the team during the Pilanesberg fire, elephant debacle. It was used when we had that massive outbreak of avian flu. Sorry, can you see? It was a few years ago. And then it was used as well in the Gulf spill. In this room, we trained some people for the Gulf spill, and then they wouldn't let any of us into the country. They got very possessive and defensive about their... We had a whole team trained. We had all of our visas. We had everybody on standby. And the guys in the States just clamped down, completely closed down, and wouldn't allow any outside agencies in. So we never got to.
Just in case you went to go see some oil.
Huh? At least we were ready. Yeah. Just a little bit about the incident command system and why it's such a wonderful system to use for something like dealing with rhino poachings, rhino calves, rhino responses, is its management by goals. So you identify, what do we need to do? We need to rescue the rhino. So it's really very, very simple. It allows you to allocate responsibilities. So the goal is to rescue the rhino. The responsibility is you've got to sort the truck out. You've got to get on site to get the rhino. So it's really simple management system. It allows you to track resources. So where is the truck? Where have we got staff? Where have we got funding? Where have we got centers? So it enables for really good resource tracking. It's highly adaptable. It can be modified to going out to rescue one Morsi, So we have a team of one, the Mossi, and you need a box, and off you go. You identified the goal, you've done it. Or it can be used for multiple responses when you've got 20,000 penguins, or as we have a very complicated rhino situation at the moment. It allows for multi-agency. So you can have the zoo involved, you can have ProTrack involved, you can have the conservation authorities involved, you can have Department of Environmental Affairs, and it's a system that allows you to manage everybody. It also, a very big part of ICS is the demobilization process, so that equipment and the networks and everything that you've pulled together can then be used for other purposes. You don't just say, okay, the crisis is over, walk away and leave behind a whole lot of resources and things that then, crates that rot and trucks that fall apart. So it's a structured demobilization. Okay, we've done this, the crisis is over, what happens to the equipment next? So a formal handover and demobilization. And a very big part of it is debriefing as well. And very often we get involved in rushing out to deal with a poaching, rushing out to deal with a calf, sort it all out, and then everything just stops. And people are left feeling, well, you know, that actually didn't work for me. I think she was very nasty to me, and there wasn't equipment, but this guy was actually really good, and we'll never work with that person again. So people walk away feeling like really angry or pleased about something, and there's no way of putting it all together. So part of ICS is, after every single incident, making a point of demobilizing, letting people say, this worked, this didn't work. What are we going to incorporate in the next one? Letting them offload about not having equipment, or this one was nasty to that one, so that when the next crisis takes place, you're actually all talking to each other.
But it's not only the debriefing of, you know, this one's nasty, whatever the case is. I think emotionally a person is sapped after that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, you've got to try and deal with your emotions of what you've been dealing with and what you've been acting with.
Mm.
So it's part of that healing that also needs to take place.
The emotional offloading. And what's really interesting is, having done crisis response training and having managed crisis teams overseas, is every workshop we go to and every meeting we have about rhino stuff, it's been really interesting for me to watch people and to watch their reactions. And overall, we've got a pretty traumatized group, pretty traumatized society by it. We're all tough, we all think we're coping, but actually there's a huge amount of frustration, of anger, of desperation about this poaching situation. So there's a definite need to be able to offload, to, you know, and to keep each other going. There are times that Renette might feel really, really good and she's got a lot of energy and she keep going, but Cassie's feeling she's had it. And on another day it might be the other way around. So it's looking at that side of it.
What if the equipment is going to be like a punching bag and fluffy handcuffs?
The other part of the ICS is that it looks very, very clearly and makes allowance for management of the legal aspects. Renette will be very happy to hear this. But it makes sure that when you actually go out to rescue that calf, that the permits are in place, that you know what your legal rights are, that you know where the pitfalls are, you know all of that side of it. And a person is actually allocated, whether it's the one person with a Mossi rescuing the Mossi who has to make sure the permit is in place, whether you have a team of 400 people, there is a person who looks at the legal side of it. It takes into account the health and safety aspects as well, both for human and animal. And then what's really, really good, and why it's critical in this rhino poaching situation, is it looks at security. And we'll go into the security aspect a little bit more. But the security on this whole rhino thing is a really, really big issue. It looks at the environmental aspects as well. So when you go in to do that phenomenal rhino rescue and response, you haven't chopped down 500 highly endangered cycads on your way in order to get the truck in. So it's being sensitive to and taking into account the environmental aspects. Looks at resources. It's very strong on financial accountability, which is good from an NGO point of view. It's good if you're doing formal responses, being able to keep track of what's going on. And then really, really good from a management point of view and a crisis point of view is it takes into account delegation and responsibility. So you, Lorna, you were told, you've got to fetch the biscuits. If the biscuits aren't there at tea time, we know exactly who to. So that's why it's a good system. A bit of the background of why we've gone for the ICS system and why I'm so keen on it, and then we'll stop talking about me and go on to the other stuff. I was part of a professional crisis management and spill response team, and we got paid. I'm a terrible fundraiser, and I ran our Rhino Rescue Centre and Wildcare for a number of years on professional response fees, being paid huge amounts of money to go over to France and manage an oil spill for 3 weeks or 4 weeks. We get paid ridiculous amounts, and that was so. It is a professional input. The I4, IBRRC, and I4 team are managed according to the ICS. The oil spills that we did as part of the international crisis response are underwritten by Lloyd's, which is a very, very big insurance company. And if you don't have a proper management system in place, and you don't have professional input, and you don't have accountability, and you don't have proper nature conservation, professional respondents from all over the world, local, everybody was pulled in. A massive temporary facility was set up. The reason that all of this was so successful was that there was a core team, a very, very well-trained core team of 15 people that had been put through intensive training, that knew how the systems worked, who'd been very carefully selected for their skills and their crisis management abilities, who didn't fall apart when they got bitten on the nose by a penguin, when they didn't fall apart because there wasn't a hairdryer in the hotel, where the good vets are, so that we put into place the same kind of thing for Rhino. And come this side for a bit, then I don't have to keep walking backwards and forwards in front of you. And that's exactly what we're dealing with at the moment, a Rhino spill. Then, just as we thought life was getting okay, and the reason I'm putting this in is because it's totally relevant to what's happening with the rhinos at the moment, is in 2003 and 2004 at Wildcare Africa, we had a massive influx of rhino. We suddenly started getting huge numbers of calves in. At one stage, we had 35 calves, all below that age. We got 3 newborn calves in within a week, including 2 black. And that's an indication that something's changing or happening. And it was at the time that the wildlife industry was starting to, really take foot and grow. There was a huge interest in acquiring private rhino, building up the stocks. So it was really the start of this whole rhino thing. And it was shortly after that that the poaching crisis started, which fortunately had nothing to do with us. We weren't responsible for that. But we were overloaded. We had a crisis. And we needed, in order to deal with it, a response team that could hit the ground running. We called in the very same guys who we'd worked with and were part of on the international oil spill team. And why I'm putting this in is not to tell you about what we did, but to show the type of confidence we want, so that when a landowner or a rhino owner has a calf that's down, when a rhino owner or national parks have a defaced calf, a defaced adult that survives a poaching crisis, they feel 100% confident to pick up the phone and say, come in. That as a group, they know what they're going to get from us. They're going to get professional response, they're going to get coordination, they're not going to get people who fall apart, they're going to get expertise. So this is why we're looking at building a network of people that we can build that confidence, we can get that rapid response, we can actually get rhinos sorted fast and quickly. So we needed a team that we could trust. We knew that when they came in, they would hit the ground running, and that's what we need to develop. Within 48 hours of phoning the international coordinator and saying, I'm now sitting with 35 rhino, plus carnivores, plus a whole lot of other things, we're going to fall apart. They had mobilized and sent us international vets and support. So it works. That's the point of all of that. And that's why we're going to use the ICS for our rhino response strategy. We're going to put in place the ICS system. Around that, we're going to develop the strategy and an operational plan, of which you and all of the guys at the workshop are going to be a part of. And then we're going to implement that plan according to the response team principles, using tried and tested protocols. We know what works for rhinos. We know what doesn't work. We know what the risks are. We know what aren't the risks. We're going to support it with ethical decision making, because if your decisions are made ethically, regardless of how difficult the situation, we'll do the right thing. And then the aspect of demobilizing and debriefing. So if Alice makes you very cross tomorrow, you'll have a chance at the demobilization to talk about it. Basically, just very, very quickly working with incident command. We identify the goals. What is the goal? To address defaced rhino, injured rhino, and calves. Delegate responsibilities and roles. Who's doing what? Who's involved? Who can we trust? Unfortunately, in this situation, that's a big part of it. So, and then allocate and track resources. So, for example, Johannesburg Zoo might have the resources to take a calf in an emergency. We might have a vet nurse on the team. We've got good anti-poaching input, just knowing what our resources are. Being able to update that system constantly. Keep track of it, and then support everything we do with good data and really good decision making. Working with ICS, we have a command structure, so you allocate right from the beginning who's the bot and is still alive. And it's basically allocating where the resources are going to be used best according to what we have, where the best possible outcome can be achieved. Part of the crisis response and getting our rhino dealt with is managing resources, and one of the most important resources in this is people. We're going to need the experts, dealing with the experts and the professionals. I hate that word, a bit. Your core team you expect just to hit the ground running. Then the various associates and partners who sort of come in, and SPA might be one of the partners and will donate a bit of food. And so the people on the periphery, but that you need to deal with. And then the agencies, your provincial conservation authorities, environmental affairs, the agencies that you need to be in contact with. And then probably one of the worst to manage is the media. And they all need to be managed in a crisis situation, and they all need to be managed differently. And then from a crisis management point of view, leadership. Identifying within yourself and thinking ahead. Sort of interesting if you're going to be staying in crisis response, if you're working in situations like the zoo where you might have an animal go down, you know, all of you in some stage might come into contact with, is having a look at different leadership styles. And the one who is my favorite, and who I've put in as an example, but you'll all have your own favorites, is Shackleton. He was an Antarctic explorer, and his major mission failed miserably. He didn't reach the pole ahead of anybody else. But what was phenomenal was that he survived, and all of his men survived. He got them all out alive, and those same people then came back to do another exploration with him. And this is one of the best quotes, and says so much about him as a leader. If you want science, then you've got to call Scott. Scott was one of the explorers who was very pedantic and did the most fantastic research. If you wanted to race to the pole to see who was getting there first, then Amundsen was the guy. He got there first, but he lost people along the way. And then there was Wilson, who was one of the other British Antarctic leaders or Antarctic guides. And he kind of treated it like a holiday. So everyone enjoyed the journey. But when all hell breaks loose, then you get down on knees, you want Shackleton. And that's what we want, is that kind of, who can we get in to help as fast as possible, who's the best under those situations. Just some of the interesting things about Shackleton. Again, you'll have different leadership people or styles that you'll develop on your own, but give a little bit of a thought of it, get a bit of thought to it. Some of the things on Shackleton that made him so successful was he boosted the morale of his crew, gave them a lot of encouragement. He also made sure that they were accountable. It's your responsibility. Why didn't you do it? So he sort of really recognized them as individuals and gave them that responsibility. He was available. His crew could walk in at any time, even under the most appalling conditions. He knew how to have fun. I don't know if any of you saw the movie on Ernest Shackleton, but when things were really, really falling apart, they were short on food, the team were desperate, they had zero chance of getting out, it was appalling weather, he took out the few brandy stores that they had and the little bit of chocolate that was left. And the guys had a party that night. And it helped to just turn the situation and take them through the next few days. He always remained optimistic, but at the same time realistic. We are going to get through it, but he was totally realistic about what the implications were. And then a really important was he kept the troublemakers close to him. And you know what the politics are like in rhino conservation, you know what the politics are like in rhino rescue and rehab and anti-poaching. He knew how to deal with them. He made sure he knew exactly where the troublemakers were in the situation, and he had them right next to him. So he knew what they were doing and could keep them busy and occupied. Then the people management part. You guys who came to the Gulf training know we went through all of this. But if you don't look after yourself, and you're not in a good physical state and a good mental state, and you're exhausted, or you went out partying last night and you've got a hell of a hangover, you let everybody down. So managing yourself, being aware of what you're doing in the situation, why you're involved, just keeping yourself healthy, both from a mental and physical perspective. Because only if you're okay will you be able to make sure that the people are around you are okay. And if you can make sure that the people around you are okay, we can actually get out and do something about rhinos. And then also being concerned about the team or your team, their safety, their well-being, and that they're equipped with the right information. Unfortunately, one of the things that so often happens with people, and we've noticed this in this rhino poaching crisis, is knowledge is power. People think, oh, I know this little bit of information, so I'm not going to share it. I'm not going to tell anybody. It doesn't work in a crisis situation. If we've got to get out there and rescue the calf and get it fed and rear it, if we've got to get out there and get things sorted out for these defaced animals, the people who are working with us need to have as much information as possible. How do we rescue? What are we doing? Who's involved? What's the best way to do it? So keep everybody equipped, both with information and knowledge. And then just managing the core team, managing your volunteers. There's a huge amount of interest out there, people wanting to be involved. But managing that activism and managing that willingness in a way that actually helps and doesn't. You know, the last thing you want to do is when you go out on a massive rescue, you're trying to get this calf that's running around the bush, and you've got these volunteers who are dead keen, have committed their time and services, and they arrive on site and everybody's waiting to rush out to the calf, and you can't go because they've promised they'll phone their mom and their granny before. So now the whole team has to wait. So managing the volunteers ahead of time, letting them know what's expected of them. Don't tell your mother you're going to phone her 7 times a day, because it might not happen. Managing your donors and supporters, so that you can actually do the next rescue, keeping them informed, keeping them updated, making sure the authorities and the agencies and conservation authorities actually know what you're doing, and then letting the media know and managing the media. It's a pity Louise isn't here, because she could give us a good thing on how to handle that side. And then the other part of crisis management, we're taking you through the various principles of getting going, is stress management. Crises are very stressful, whether we like it or not. It's the nature of them. Some of us do well under it, some of us don't, but they are stressful. And everybody involved with you is going to be stressed, the animals and the people. That affects behavior and reactions, both of people and of the animals that you're working with. So a rhino who's chilled and happy and hasn't been shot is going to behave very, very differently to a rhino that's got 3 bullets in it and has just gone through a poaching situation. A rhino calf that's suckling happily with its mom will behave very, very differently to the calf that has seen the mother poached, its face hacked off, and has had to run for kilometers. So that stress affects the people and it affects the animals, and managing it is an important part of it. Makes people and animals incredibly unpredictable. So basically understanding how stress affects animals and people. Identifying stress, knowing in the animal that you're going to be working with or are working on, what is stress? How is it affecting them? Is it very stressed? And then identifying in the people around you that you're working with. Because if you get to the final point and you're about to grab that rhino calf and rush it to safety, and you haven't picked up the 2 or 3 of your team members are absolutely exhausted and on the point of breaking, as you go in, and it might be something as simple, I mean, the animal people understand this, you have to manhandle that calf to get it, Or it might be quite distressful when you actually dart and it starts falling over the place. Your people who are highly stressed around you, for them might just be the breaking point. And that's when you least need somebody to fall apart on you. So being aware of all of that. And yes?
I'd just like to know, this is an early question, but if you go to the scene, into a field, a lot of the time there's a lot of people there that don't need to be there. What would you say is a recommended amount of people for crisis management to act to a scene? Let's say one.
Few as possible.
How many?
As few as possible, yeah. That'll be where your leadership comes in that as a good leader, if you are the person who's heading up the response on that calf, getting in and saying to people, this calf is highly stressed, it's highly unpredictable, we don't know which way it's going to run, we don't know if there's still poachers on the scene. So actually taking control of that situation and getting as many people out of the way as possible. If we can find a way to manage people and this crowd control, it'll make our job 1,000,000 times easier. It's one of the most complicating factors in this whole rhino poaching situation. Touching, pulling tail hairs out, having a photograph, and even if that rhino is on M99, depending on the dose, very, very high dose, they can be completely anesthetized. At the lower doses, or when they're starting to come round or starting to go into it, that rhino is still picking up certain stimuli. So even though the cotton wool is in the ears, even though it's got a blindfold on, it's still picking up the fact it's now got 3 people sitting on its back. Or there's noise and movement going around. Katja, can you elaborate a bit on that? And also, Katja, before you go, if you can just mention what happens when you first dart an animal or drug an animal as it's going into that. If you suddenly excite it, you mess it all up. But Katja will hopefully give us a bit of...
Most of the time when we deal with rhinos, we use a drug called M99, we're talking about chloride. Now, the drug is highly dangerous to humans, and I'm sure you've all been told, one prick through your skin can actually kill a human. So first of all, when you're handling the drug, it should be nobody who doesn't know how to handle the drug being involved and getting completely left out. So that's because you're actually endangering these people, these people are endangering themselves. So it should be the people involved. And when we're looking at the animal, the more stressed the animal is to start off with, and we've done it before in Kruger stop when we actually want to rescue rhinos, which we've been running, as Karen says, for days before we actually get to them and get them darted. They are so stressed. So you want to have the stimuli to the minimum. So when you dart this animal, it takes about 8 to 12 minutes to go down, depending on the dart placement. And in this piece, you actually want to keep the minimum stress out. You don't want to go down with all the new people trying to chase him in and rushing in and getting a shot. It actually destroys him. You might actually not start again because all the adrenaline going into the calf will actually prevent it from acting the way it should be. Once it's going down, there is some sort of excitatory phase where that if you stimulate it a lot, you actually do the longest thing, you're actually preventing the drug from working later. Once it's down, you can handle, as we said, you can put the blindfold on, you can put the cotton wool in, and the stimulus will put to a minimum again. So if you don't do that loud noises or a lot of shouting, this animal's feeling the stress, particularly if you're having a relatively light, it's a stress animal, just want to load it. Because all you're able to do is to get it low, to get it out of the situation, to get it into safety, you're keeping it very low, and now you're stressing it out immensely. So when I'm trying to get the stress away, it's so everybody wants to be involved, and everybody wants to follow this street runner. And you're like, guys, let us work. Let us deal with this animal, let us load the animal in a safe manner and get this animal. And then the same thing, we usually reverse it partially, and I'm sure you've seen it when you're loading, if we're talking about partial antagonist. So I'm actually making this run on there just so you can look up and you can get it loaded before you reverse it completely. In that phase, again, if you want to have everybody shouting and screaming, it's the wrong time. Really, then you might have the animal jump off or you might have to resedate it. So it becomes a really difficult situation. So you need to get this animal loaded in a safe manner, really quietly, get it unloaded in the home. And again, we don't want to have everybody shouting and screaming and that. This animal's in a new environment, doesn't know where it's going. Just put it in a boma. It's never seen a boma in its life before. So chances are it's going to try and charge its rules, tickle up everybody screaming, shouting, and ringing. So you actually want to keep it to a minimum. You want to get people away.
At different stages of your crisis management, there will be different people doing different things depending on the process.
Yeah.
But specifically on that one, for instance, I've seen this happen before when loading calf, for instance, there were a whole lot of people there. Well, how many people would you say is a minimum or maximum amount of people to have one rhino?
Well, it depends on the weight.
Depends on the weight and the.
People hold.
Full grown?
Full grown. If you've got a good capture team, I would probably say 8.
8.
Probably, but that's depending on your capture team. Because it should be the trained people who are being loading with you, should know what they're doing, and they all have a position in the team. And there shouldn't be anybody who's not in that team on that. They should be well away and watching.
And then even if you've got, well, let's say a team of 8, if there's a smaller runner, they would be trained.
Yeah, that's fine. Your team of 8 is fine.
Yeah,
If
smaller
your team of 8
calf.
knows what they're doing. And it's a team of 8 exactly. Every person has a position, and everybody knows what to do in their position.
And your team also briefs, so they know they shouldn't maybe not.
Yeah, Lorna's just raised the point that I was going to raise, is that you brief people before they even, so before you've even got to the gate of the rhino owner's property, everybody who's tagging along, you stop and you tell them. We're going to go onto the property. You have to respect, the owner will only allow a certain number on. When we dart the rhino, this is what's going to happen. And quite often, if you appeal to people and you explain to them ahead of time why, that as the animal starts going down and the drug starts working, he may become hypersensitive or hyperstimulated. There will always be some people who are going to be difficult and will insist on coming, and they're always going to be tag-alongs. But if you can try and manage and reduce the number of people who are actually on site, and certainly from the response strategy point of view, we would prefer to be very unpopular for not allowing 15 volunteers to come and have photographs, but be very popular because we've actually effectively saved the rhino, and at the end of it we still have a live rhino that's face is intact and he hasn't been stressed. So if you've got the answer to managing people, we'd love to hear it.
No.
Dart gun. I can see.
A lot of the time it is the private landowner that encourages more people to come onto the property where you don't have much of a say.
Well,
Amy, how do you manage it from a private capture operator's point of view?
No one knows about it, we just go in on it by ourselves. And most of the guys where we work with, they also just want to be quiet. Because they understand.
But if you speak to your owner before and you explain your situation, this is what I'm going to deal with, this is what the people I want to. Please don't have extras allowed. You know what? Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes he wants his kids to touch the rhino, but you can limit it. You can say, listen, I give you 30 seconds. You can have one photo shoot, and you're not touching, and you're crossing your hands behind. I've done it before because I had to. I said, if the kids really need to see the rhino, they must put their hands behind their back, and they can stand there for 30 seconds, and then I want everybody out. Because you're giving them unlimited time, you make it very clear they will respect you for it. They will allow you, they will do that 30 seconds you've given them, and they will not interfere in the rest of the operation. If you don't sometimes give them that opportunity, they're all trying to do it all over again. So sometimes it's just limiting the amount of people who you're giving this opportunity to say, lion, I am not responsibility. You guys don't have to shoot how there. I want you on A, B, and C, and other than that, you stay in the vehicle. And they actually listen. Particularly if you're in danger, if they get black.
You speak to the owner himself first, he's got authority over that.
Yeah.
He understands that thoroughly within the quick 5-minute briefing itself.
Yeah, you need to explain to him, this is your rhino, that the 5-minute or 10-minute volunteer or photographic opportunity for your guests or for whoever's hanging around may well mean the death of your rhino. I mean, you can really, because it's a reality. That animal can die. Hopefully everything goes okay, but you never know. So take the time to explain to him. It's your rhino and you've got a choice. Either you let us do the work properly and control the crowd, or there is a risk that...
And give him the worst case scenario, so that you basically strengthen the
Yeah.
and then you'll understand better.
It's probably the one aspect that is the hardest in all of this to manage, is the hangers on and the crowd control, and then something happens and everybody rushes forward and they want to touch and they want to. And we'll talk about it from a security point of view just now as well. It's a massive security risk. The whole Facebook thing, volunteers along on this rhino rescue, photograph, and the fence is in the background, photograph, and there's another guy over here, paste it up on Facebook. It's a massive security risk from the rhino point of view. And also when you go in to do a rescue, checking ahead of time with the rhino owner whether he objects to people coming onto his property. How many will be allowed onto his property. You have to respect that you're going onto private property, that if you're coming to do a rescue or response, he doesn't want you to bring 45 cousins and sisters and uncles along with him. Most of the really good capture crews and help. It's really, really basic stuff. And I mean, we'll do this as part of the rescue and response and support. Basic stuff like monitoring the respiration. So that when you pick up the phone and you say to the vet, the respiration in the last 3 hours has gone from so many per minute to so many per minute, it's erratic. This is the hydration status. This is so that you are in a position to monitor what's happened and give feedback and take the necessary action. You know, the vet may arrive on site, put up a drip, and at least there's then someone on site to keep it running. I mean, it's really, really basic stuff, but it's where this whole system is coming completely.
It's basic, but it's between life and death at that time. So, yeah.
Something as simple as if you've got a defaced rhino and he's sitting out in the veld because he's too weak to stand. I mean, we've seen video footage, we've gone onto properties to see some of it. It's no shade. He has got this huge open face wound and there's no shade. And he's dehydrated. 1 litre of drip's been run in and it's...
Karen, what happens, and this obviously does happen too, if a rhino has been shot, it's injured, can be saved, and the farmer doesn't want to fork out money. Maybe he had 2 rhinos shot the week before. Is there somebody that is willing to take these rhinos so that you can still save it, still pull a vet out, like you're saying, finance signing? Or do you let the farmer do his thing, and somehow you can inform him and say, listen, you know, you can save this rhino and you're going to give it away. If it's sort of not a calf, for instance.
The ultimate legal decision on that rhino will remain with the owner. But in many cases, if you can assure the owner that the effort that goes into treating the rhino, that there is an ultimate place it can go to, they may be more willing to put out the money to save that rhino, to put into veterinary costs, because there have been a huge amount of effort and expenditure to date, and they've lost the rhinos anyway. So part of it is building up the expertise to be able to say, for your effort and your financial thing, we can guarantee a slightly better success rate. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is then accepting that some rhino owners are purely in for commercial and they don't have the money. Some people, you know, really would like to put the money in but just don't have it. So there is an emergency fund being built up through the Endangered Wildlife Trust. It is the one aspect that you can very, very easily get volunteers and donors on. But again, that money needs to be managed properly. The money is out there. You can get those funds. It's just making sure that that money is then directed in the right way.
Just remember, at the end of the day, that rhino owner is the guy who's in possession of the permit to possess that rhino. Okay, if he decides he doesn't want anything to be done to that rhino, you can't force him into a situation. That's his decision. That's his decision. You need to respect it. Very hard. Because sometimes you have to watch an animal dying because he doesn't.
Two bases. Either you rear the calf for the owner and it goes back to him with certain contractual obligations that it doesn't get dehorned and sent to China, or he donates it, which is how we used to work with KwaZulu-Natal Nature Conservation and sand parks. They donate the rhino and it's then your responsibility to. But they need to make sure, and this is where it's building up this confidence and this credibility amongst the rhino people. They want to make sure that when they hand you that calf for rescue, that they aren't going to get negative feedback and kickback from media or the public complaining. And this is what's happened with sand parks. Some of their rhino was sent to various orphanages where they became sort of tourist attractions and for the students to play with. And the parks got hammered so badly for that they now won't. So it's having options available for the owners, whether it's national parks or provincial owners or private owners, where they feel comfortable handing it over.
Cover it later on with the day tomorrow about who you contact if the farmer decides to make it.
Give us a shout. Yeah, there is a very small, it's still at this stage small, but there is an emergency fund available. Our network is growing and every workshop we have is growing. There are a number of vets and people who are willing to get in and assist. and certainly through formalized structures where you can guarantee where the funding is going and actually show accountability, there is donor funding available for this type of thing.
How can we help to make sure that that kitty becomes bigger, so that if there is a problem, at least people can react?
Being a part of this formal structure.
But I mean money-wise.
Well, there's an emergency fund sitting at EWT if anybody wants to contribute towards that. Fantastic.
I've got the bank details and the code here. The code is a code that's specifically in our financial system, where all the money that comes in there goes specifically for the rhino orphans. Doesn't get spent anywhere else. Goes for rhino orphans. It's audited. It's checked.
And there's an allocated emergency fund that cannot be touched for
So
anything.
that there's accountability. So if somebody says, okay, I'm donating 10,000 rand, but I want to know what happened to that money, we have those checks and balances in place so that we can say, okay, your 10,000 rand that you donated, it went to help move that little rhino calf to it.
Confident that it's not going into dinner parties and
It's not putting somebody's new Land Rover or new camera or whatever. It's going specifically for the animals.
so I can't have my new Land Rover. Okay, I'm going now.
So that specific fund with that code is only for the rhino orphans. It doesn't go to it might go to buying equipment, but it doesn't go to paying anybody's salary. Nobody, no person
Takes a salary from
What
this.
I'm saying is more people need to know about that fund. Because at this stage, I don't know if anybody knows about it.
It's in the last 2 months that this whole thing is taking off with that, yeah. And it's interesting because all the questions, all the things you're throwing at us are exactly the reasons why it was started and sort of justifies why we need to push ahead with this. That we can say to an owner, these are your options, and that the owner feels absolutely comfortable that he's not going to get any comeback on it, that he's doing what is legal. And there'll always be difficult owners, and
that you don't
times
have
you
an owner
might
who says, okay, I'm donating the animal to you, and at the end
starting to say, look, these are what your options are, but we're going to phone in the meantime for someone to come and help you. Or hopefully in a couple of months we'll have someone in Hoedspruit who's been trained up and equipped to do it. Part of the ProTrack from our discussions, and we're saying we're getting some of your guys trained up a little bit better so that they are the first guys on site and are in that better position to help.
So EWT is just the facilitator.
Facilitator.
We know our shortcomings, and we know that we don't have the expertise out there, and we're not out in the field. We're sitting up here in Joburg in the mud flats, then Molderfontein. So we bow to the expertise out there, but we facilitate the whole thing so that when you talk to a landowner, you can say to him, it's been facilitated properly, the money is being audited, it's properly accounted for, and that it doesn't become ever the property of the EWT. We don't own animals, and we're not interested in owning animals, so it will never become our property. It becomes the property of the person to whom that owner donated.
Or whatever for the next 6 months. But I'm willing to let you take it, and I'm willing to hand the animal over as long as it goes to conservation. You have others who'll say, under no circumstances, don't give a hoot about this animal. It's going to cost me too much, I want it shot. And you can try and negotiate with him. But the best thing you can do in that situation is try and speed up the animal being put out of its misery so it doesn't lie in a boma for 6 weeks. There's a whole range in between those that it depends entirely on the owner, your ability to negotiate, and the confidence that rhino owners have in a system that you're proposing to them. Yeah, no, she's nodding her head. Yes, I can see agreement. Sorry.
I was thinking, if there's farms, we also know a lot of farms that don't have anti-poaching, and they are being affected because obviously they're soft targets.
Funding is out there. There is huge amounts of money available. It just has to be channeled and accounted for in the right. And that's where the loopholes are at the moment. There is so much amazing goodwill and amazing donations out there that are going into appointing new CEOs, having fancy offices, buying new vehicles. That money could so easily and reasonably be channeled towards actually paying for a rhino's veterinary costs and relocation. Like the zoo, for example, Katia frequently will go and help other organizations, but the zoo can't afford every time to have her off-site. So if you can have some funding that would pay transport, There are a number of vets who are very happy in a situation where an animal
So we go out,
isn't owned.
we will respond, and there's no veterinary professional fees involved for us. We usually do it for the rhino. So if Karen phones me, she says she's a rhino there.
Like a cow.
She needs my help. Come out. We'll be coming out, and all we're going to ask in return is because our budget is quite small, is that you cover our costs for transport and you cover our drug costs. And I'm not even upmarking it. This is what I'm paying.
For the medicine.
It's for the medicine I'm putting in and for the cost to get here. Because unfortunately the zoo hasn't got unlimited fund. We have a quite close one, so you need to pay us that. But our professional time we usually delay. So we'll come out, Karen phones us, and if we have an emergency, we'll come out, even at 3 in the morning, we'll assess the rate rhino, we'll do anything we need to do there, and there'll be a small amount of cost.
And nobody checks out whether the guy knows what he's doing or whether he's got the right enclosures. Yeah.
But shouldn't they be doing that to current rhino owners as well? That they've got to confirm that they have these certain things in place in order to own those rhino. And if they don't have it, then the rhino...
So that rhino owner, if he has a rhino that's been shot 10 times or has a broken leg and is lying in his boma, or he has a rhino that has been defaced but is still alive, legally he cannot just allow that animal to lie there. He has to, by law, under the Animals Protection Act, do something. Whether it's putting it out of its misery immediately in a humane manner, or whether it is getting whether it's getting veterinary attention. There is an Animals Protection Act that covers that type of thing. And there also, under that, there is the leeway to do what is right for the animal in an emergency situation. So if the rhino owner has got a rhino lying in the boma with severe injuries or he's suffering and he doesn't do anything about it because he has the money, and you get onto his property and ask if you can do something to help, and he then decides to be a little bit difficult, the judge will have a look and say, did you do what a reasonable person would do under those? And I mean, there's a lovely... But there's a lovely precedent that was set by one of the very controversial ladies in rehab and rescue, Rita Milieu. She's up in Palabora and she runs a baboon rescue center. She's highly controversial and she's really difficult, and she has a facility that has baboons running all over the place. But she set an amazing legal precedent. She heard that there was a baby baboon in Barberton that was going to be shot by the conservation authorities. So she left her facility and she went and rescued this baboon in Barberton, knowing that the conservation authorities were on the way to shoot it. She got a phone call to say they've heard about it and they're now following you. So she went the back road. She was then charged by Limpopo province and by Mpumalanga province for illegal transportation and import and exportation of a baby baboon. And it was taken to court. The judge looked at both of these cases and he threw the one out. He said 2 provinces can't prosecute on the same offense. So one of you go away and one of you come back with a proper charge. So Limpopo province then took her to court for illegal transport and handling of this primate. The judge took one look and he said to her, why did you do it? So she said, I love baboons, I've been rescuing and rearing them all of my life, and she said, I knew they were going to shoot it and it's a healthy animal, and I went and rescued it. And she won the court case because the judgment was that she did what any reasonable person would do under the circumstances.
And the fact that she's a registered permitted rehab in Limpopo.
Yeah. But there is leeway. Yeah, there's leeway. You've got a much stronger force to. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Okay, shall we have a comfort break? And then before we start on the rhino and rescue stuff, we're going to do the sticky that doesn't sort of jump on the bandwagon of the fundraising thing. And then we're looking as well at a specialized orphanage. The facilities are currently being renovated and hopefully will be launched within the next week or 2. We're also looking at partnerships with other facilities, and that will either be in combination with the Endangered Wildlife Trust, depending on the facility, working with other facilities who might be taking injured adults, working with anti-poaching units, working with Onderstepoort, working with vets. So basically pulling together anybody who's concerned about rhino into this national network. So that's where we're coming from on the rhino response strategy. Are there any questions on that one? Got you all totally stumped right at the beginning, and I haven't even said much.
It takes a lot of talent to do that.
It also takes a lot of talent to work somebody else's computer. We had connection issues this morning, so we're using Lorna's. Lorna, can we just get on to the next? We will be sorted out, hopefully, by lunchtime.
What's your next one?
The next one is the crisis management. That was right there. Yeah. Thank you. Before we talk about rhinos and before we start developing a network and pulling everyone together and learning how to rescue rhino and how to rear them, a little bit about crisis management. This is a crisis, and that if you're going to network and you're going to be responding to situations like this, you need to actually have the right approach. So, crisis management. What is a crisis? The definition, or the formal definition, and some of the ladies who did the Gulf training with us will have gone through some of this as well. A crisis is when there is a significant threat, or when there's a turning point in a situation, and that's exactly what we faced with rhino. Rhino populations are being threatened, and it's a turning point. If we don't get this rhino crisis under control, it's going to be a massive turning point in the conservation of the species. And a crisis is a situation that, if not handled correctly, can have disastrous implications. And it sounds like all doom and gloom, but the fact is that the rhino situation is a massive crisis. What are some of the characteristics of a crisis? What makes what we're dealing with the calves,